Good morning, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing to you Nicole for the Nintendo Switch. Now, if you're the type of person that groans when you see gameplay that involves heavy statistics and a lot of reading, you're probably not going to want to play this game. And I do not blame you. If you think this footage is boring and repetitive and keeps reusing music and sound effects, you'd be absolutely right. However, you'll also be glad to know that the statistics stuff that I'm showing first is completely optional. There's also visual novel and dating sim elements to this game, which you can actually make that the only way you play, which may appeal to people that are more interested in the story, which is what I did first. So allow me to explain. When you choose to not have all of these statistics on the screen, you play as a college freshman named Nicole, and there are 4 boys at the college that she takes a liking to. And the goal of the game is to choose one of them that you want to romance. And then that'll affect one of 10 endings that you can possibly get. Most of the endings are pretty different from each other, with only slight similarities. So I would say it's worth it to try to get as many as possible, especially because a lot of these boys comes across as kinda sorta jerks at first, but with certain redeeming qualities, which could also be said of Nicole. She's an extremely well written character that has very spastic, kind of teasy elements, but is also really keen on developing people. Why this matters is because you really get to see the boys develop into full fledged characters. And romancing them just adds a lot more to their development. If anything, the writing in this game is probably its strongest point, aside from numerous typos that my friend Nick and I spotted, which sometimes changed the entire meaning of a sentence when we were trying to make a joke. Overall, hearing Nicole's story and how she interacts with people, especially her inner monologues, never got old. I loved imitating her happy go lucky voice, or at least what I assumed was her voice, because there's no voice acting. And overall, while the story was very predictable and not particularly groundbreaking by visual novel standards, one thing that it does do is it tries to provide environment and immersiveness, which is usually not something you expect in this genre. The environments are hand drawn and usually highly detailed. The character models are nice without coming across too anime, and the characters actually change their outfits depending on the occasion, which really helps you get more immersed in the moment. Sometimes there's music, sometimes there's silence, sometimes there's only ambiance. And while there aren't too many music tracks, the few that exist are really high quality and probably were live performed too, which is always a plus. So, in the visual novel mode, there has to be at least a little bit of gameplay, otherwise, you'd be probably better off just reading a book. There is, but not that much. First off, in scenarios with the boys, you often get to choose how you want Nicole to respond in the conversation. And if you choose the right option, then you'll get more relationship points for that particular boy. And the only way you'll get their special endings is if you max out their gauge to 100, which means you basically have to make the perfect choice each time. Now, even though you do get a lot of save files, approximately 24 if I'm doing the math right, that doesn't mean that you have to be constantly saving all the time in case you make the wrong choice. My friend Nick actually discovered that it's possible to rewind the game whenever you want. Ironic, considering that this isn't even a virtual console port. If you press one of the L buttons on your controller, you can actually go back in time as much as you want. The game's not going to penalize you for it, and you can skip any repeat dialogue. This seems to be pretty hit or miss most of the time, as there has been repeat dialogues on other playthroughs that I haven't been able to skip, but some that I have. I don't know what parameters trigger it or not, but it is nice that if you choose the wrong option, and even if you go into another scene, you can just reverse as much as you want and play it all over again in case you missed a bit of dialogue, or just keep going until you get the right choice if you want the perfect ending. You then choose which of the 4 boys you want to romance, and then the second half of the game is more or less focusing on their events and their story and their character development. Now, what about all this boring statistical stuff that you're seeing here? believe it or not, this was actually the way the game was meant to be played, and it was only later that they gave you the option to play exclusively in visual novel mode. In this simulation series, you've got a variety of statistics on the left side that increase Nicole's effectiveness at whatever it is she wants to accomplish. Your ultimate goal is that you're going to want to solve the mystery of a series of disappearances that have been happening at her school. However, to maximize the amount of clues you find, that'll depend on the other stats you've raised by doing other activities. So, if you have good diligence and wit, that might allow you to find more clues, which will trigger more scenes that allows Nicole to investigate the abductions and learn more information about the general plot. However, you can completely ignore the mystery if you want. If you go into visual novel mode, you even have the option to turn the mystery off and just turn this into a dating simulator, which is totally fine. The game doesn't really penalize you for not choosing to investigate for clues, and instead you can just focus all of your affections on romancing the right guy, which is totally possible. You won't get as satisfactory of an ending, but at the same time, the game can still be enjoyed without talking about abductions or any of that stuff. It's especially important to note that while the simulation can be fun, it can also be a bit drawn out at times, as I found that even though it went snappy, the conversations usually repeated themselves. Like every single time I would choose to have Nicole play volleyball, she would say the same old thing. While the dialogue in the visual novel was really engaging and inventive, the simulation moments were anything but that. Would it have killed the game to maybe write more scenarios, like when Nicole's talking to her friends, you say who the friends are? Or maybe they could have different dialogue for every time Nicole does an event, like maybe when the story progresses, she'll say like, man, I could have really used that nap after that brutal test. Something along those lines. It doesn't feel like you're invested in Nicole during these sections, which is the total opposite during the visual novels. I also hate how when you're going through a menu of choices, it's hard to tell which one you're necessarily highlighting because the purple clashes incredibly with the other purple settings of everything else. A lot of times I made the wrong choice in a menu, meant to say wrong choice, because I thought the white was the answer that you were hovering over because you're against a purple backdrop. So I don't know, maybe they weren't that great at graphic design in this game, but honestly, an option to change the font would have been much appreciated. That being said, you can change the speed of the dialogue, and you can make it so fast that the text appears instant, which is really nice. I found that the conclusion to the game was satisfying enough. It's not going to blow your mind like an Ace Attorney or a Zero Escape game, but at the very least, if you want a competent dating simulator that allows an established character that is not a self-insert protagonist, and both she and the boys have a good amount of faults and strengths to balance each other out, then I would say this is one of the more realistic romance sims. It definitely does not feel like you are inserting yourself into the story, but rather telling Nicole how to progress. So there's a greater sense of satisfaction when she finally does get her way. Well, I guess that's a mean way of putting it, but it's also the truth. So this game I bought for about $15, and I think that was a pretty good price. By indie standards, this is definitely not a bad approach. It certainly beats out when I tried to play We Should Talk, which was way more dull and boring because that it wasn't as engaging, wasn't as fun, the writing didn't feel as realistic, I couldn't really connect to the characters, and in this, I felt like I could connect with Nicole right away. While it's true that I couldn't see myself being either her personality or her gender, which allowed me to question a lot of the decisions she was making because I had to think, okay, what would a girl that's the total opposite of my personality respond to here, which challenged me to start thinking outside of my own perspective. Overall, I would say whether or not you should pick up this game is really going to be dependent on whether or not you like visual novels. As, like I said, You can ignore all of the annoying statistics on the left side of the screen and just play it for the story, and it should be competent enough. However, when you do play the simulation mode, you have a greater sense of satisfaction that you were able to guide Nicole toward the desired ending. And you can even set the difficulty to easy if you find that all those stats are overwhelming. The game gives you a clear indication of how much you're going to gain or lose by doing each activity, and there's usually a lot of choices to help you feel like you're more able to sort of express yourself within the confines of Nicole's character. So I would say if you want just a visual novel, this will be serviceable, albeit not too much in the realm of player choice, and your outcome will be pretty much predetermined. However, if you like romance simulation games, this is not the kind of game if you're looking for a waifu simulator, or if you're trying to do something like Byleth in Three Houses, where you insert yourself into the character. But if you like games where you want to be super detailed and really get the hang of taking charge of every single facet of Nicole's personality and energy levels, then I think this is worth a shot. Since this came out in 2020, I think, unless the eShop was lying to me, I would probably have to give this probably a 12 out of 20. It definitely has its rough spots, and I can definitely see how there are some people that just simply are not going to like this because they want more action and more things to do in a game. However, the story was decent enough, the writing was amazing despite the typos. I loved Nicole as a character, and especially with my friend Nick there, it was always a pleasure to see him try to do the voices of the guys, because as you can probably tell, I have a ridiculously high-pitched voice for a guy, and so I could handle Nicole's voice not a problem. This is the kind of game that I would recommend not going in blind, like I would say for most visual novels, and really researching, assuming this review wasn't enough, how much this game can give that you would like. So, with that in mind, thank you very much for watching. If I somehow still left something out, please let me know in the comment section. I'll answer it to the best of my ability. Until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and I hope you have more of a head on your shoulders than Nicole does, because she makes some pretty airheaded decisions sometimes. Bye!